Okay, so let me just pull up the agenda here. Great. So welcome. Let's get started. So this is a public presentation on the town's housing strategy and actions to date, but it's also an affordable housing subcommittee meeting just because of the rules of the state. When we have a gathering of enough of the planning of the affordable housing subcommittee that we're a quorum, we need to hold a meeting. So we're just going to do a few formalities to basically just get the meeting started, and then the presentation will start in just a minute. I'm going to pull up the packet here. Let's see, 1 second.
Jeff, can you have the committee introduce themselves? That would be helpful. Yeah.
It will happen. It will happen. It's all part of the plan.
Oh, good. Thanks a lot. Appreciate
Just give me 1 second here to just pull up the agenda and we'll get started. Okay, so here is the agenda, and the first item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Brian moved. Second?
Second.
Okay.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, Brian?
Aye.
Yes.
Paul?
Yep. Yes.
Kathleen, yes. Jeff, yes. Is there any other member of the planning of the affordable housing subcommittee here that's not on screen? I don't think so. Motion passes 4-0. So we are now going to turn things over to Kathleen, who's going to walk us through the presentation this evening. And there will be lots of time for public input. So we're just going to do share some information first, and then look forward to hearing your views. So Kathleen.
Oh, thanks everybody for coming this evening. And we will start with Jackie's suggestion that we introduce ourselves to one another, and we'll start with the members of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, of whom, well, why don't we start with you, Jeff, since you're the clerk.
I'm the chair. Yeah, I'm Jeff Lubell. I'm the chair of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee. I live on Spring Pond Road in Norwich, and looking forward to sharing what we're up to and getting some feedback.
And I'm Kathleen Shepard. I'm serving as secretary, and have lived on New Boston Road for 45 years.
Go for it, Paul.
Go ahead.
My name is Paul Manganello. I'm on the subcommittee, and I live at 226 Turnpike Road.
And my name is Brian Loeb. I am also a member of the Planning Commission. And if it matters, I live on Willie Hill Road. Yeah, just really thankful to see so much interest, seeing some familiar faces, seeing some new faces. Glad to have the attention. And, you know, if you hear things you like tonight or want to get more involved in, we have monthly meetings. We'd love to have you. So thanks for coming.
I'm going to call the people because not everybody can see everybody and you wouldn't know when to speak up. So let's hear from Susan Barrett. Would you care to introduce yourself?
Oh, Kathleen.
Sure.
I'm sorry, 1 second. Feel free to have Susan introduce herself, but I'd rather not. Can we just have people put their name in the chat so we don't, we have 17 people here.
Oh, okay. Oh, all right. You don't want to take the time. Fine. All right. Well, it's nice to see you all, neighbors. Thank you. Thank you.
Could you put your names in the chat? Please introduce yourself, tell us where you live, say anything you want to say, just so we have a record, and we'll capture this. That will be most helpful. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, and as you know, this is being recorded. It's necessary, and if you don't like being recorded, you all you have to do is turn off your video, and you can still participate. Jeff Lubell is going to give an overview of the Norwich housing strategy that has been created, and it'll take about 10 minutes to do that. and we'll take questions about it afterwards. It's very helpful to me as the secretary if you put your questions in chat, because it just helps me keep track of everything. And we really do want to hear from you, and there's going to be plenty of opportunity to do that.
Great. And Kathleen, would you like to take questions after each of our presentations, or you want me and Brian to go and then we'll stop? What's your preference?
Why don't the two? Well, I think it would be more efficient if the two, because things fit together. Okay, and so why not have Jeff start and for 10 minutes, and then Brian follow for another 10 minutes. That gives us plenty of time.
Kathleen, can you definitely see what people type in the chat?
What Jeff has told me is that he's able to copy, which somehow last week as a participant, I stopped being able to copy out of chats. But apparently you can copy the chat, and then we'll have a record of people's comments and interests.
Great. And we have one more member of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee who's joined. Cree, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
Hi, Cree.
Hi, I'm in a new situation here, so I haven't figured out the video yet, but here's the audio.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Well, great. So I'm going to share my screen and looking forward to just sharing some information about, some information about our housing strategy. And give me 1 second just to pull this up. All right, and slideshow from beginning. Can everyone see the screen? Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So, so this is the Norwich Housing Strategy. It was approved in 2019 and incorporated it into an appendix to the Norwich Town Plan in 2020. And it is a multi-pronged strategy designed to achieve 3 key housing goals that I'll talk a little bit about in a second. And it covers the 5-year period from January 1st, 2020 through December 31, 2024. It was just a little bit of history here. This is the work of the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, but it's grounded in a whole series of listening sessions. We had 5 separate listening sessions to inform our initial development of the plan. We had 2 additional public sessions at the Planning Commission, and then it went through incorporated into the town plan, and there were still additional public input sessions. So there's been lots of public input. That doesn't mean we're done. We still want public input. That's why we're here, but we just want you to understand. I think it's important that this is something that had some grounding in the input from the town. So this is just a little bit of data. I don't want to go too much into all of the data, but you'll see on the left here, this is the median sales price of homes through 2018. This was the data that we considered in developing the town plan. You see that the median sales price in 2018 was $649,000, which was a jump from prior years. And then on the right, you see that the things have not gotten better. Basically, there's been a pretty consistent increase in home values between 2018 and 2022. And so there's definitely a problem, in the sense that their housing is very expensive and really limits the range of people who can afford to live in Norwich. So the housing strategy is designed to achieve 3 goals. One is to ensure that people of all incomes can find housing they can afford in Norwich. So we believe that a well-functioning housing market includes housing at different levels that people can afford with different incomes. We also want to ensure that there's the stock of housing is diverse in the sense that it includes a range of housing types that are suitable for people of different incomes and backgrounds and at different stages of their life. We need rental housing, we need for sale housing, we need a lot of housing needs that we identified, including needs for older adults who want to live age in place, families with children who are looking for rental housing or home ownership, and also people who work in the town, teachers, police, other employees of the town that really are being priced out and can't afford to live here. And then a third goal is really to, is that of environmental sustainability. So we want to reduce energy use and greenhouse gas emissions by increasing housing in areas served by public transit and with easy access to employment and retail centers, as well as through green building materials and practices. So those are the three goals that animate the plan. To address, we have several goals that we set out. To be honest, we're halfway through this plan already. We have, I think it's going to be difficult to achieve these. These were 5-year goals. We wanted to see 10 accessory dwelling units, at least 10 units of what we call missing middle housing, which are duplexes or triplexes or garden style apartments. And we wanted to construct at least 25 units of dedicated affordable housing. So some quick definitions that I think will be helpful for understanding the goals and also our plan. So accessory dwelling units, you probably have heard of them. You know, sometimes they're called granny flats or in-law suites. These are units that are located, you know, on the same lot as a principal unit. Missing middle housing is a increasingly popular term. It refers basically to housing that falls in between, on the one hand, single-family homes, and on the other hand, kind of mid-rise rental and co-op construction. And so it includes duplexes, triplexes, townhomes. It's a very traditional housing stock in much of the country, but it's missing largely. There's not a lot of it these days. And dedicated affordable housing is, you know, sometimes people think of subsidized housing, or sometimes it's just called affordable housing. But by dedicated affordable housing, we mean housing that is guaranteed to rent or sell at a level that's affordable. So there's a legal restriction that makes it affordable. So those are our goals. We have 5 strategies. I'm just going to quickly walk through them. I should say that the goal here in developing this is really to try to be very broad, knowing that you know, there's no one single thing that's going, no magic bullet that's going to solve all of our housing strategies, but rather we need to operate on multiple fronts. And so that's really the goal here. You know, the other thing is we really heard people in the listening sessions talk about the high tax burden, and we really don't want to do something that's going to increase our property taxes. So that also limited the availability here. So we have so really quickly, we have a $45,000 affordable housing revolving fund that was funded many years ago. It was renewed recently. We want to formalize that and grow that. So if anyone wants to donate to help us grow that fund, let us know. Norwich has a bonus that it provides for people who build affordable housing as part of a larger planned unit development, and we want to review that and make sure that it still is effective. It's never been used, which suggests that maybe it needs to be revisited. We do want to think about whether developments over a certain size should be required to include affordable units. It's actually a requirement of the regional plan. We wanted to look at land owned or controlled by the town of Norwich to see if we could repurpose some of that for dedicated affordable housing. And Brian's going to talk about that's an exercise that we've completed. We're very interested in encouraging donation of land for dedicated affordable housing. So again, if you have some land and you think that maybe it could be useful for increasing the affordability or diversity or environmental sustainability of our housing stock, please get in touch with us. We'd love to know. And then we want to just let people know. We want to let developers know that we want affordable housing here. And that's purpose of this meeting. And that's partly to try to, you know, get the word out. The second strategy, so that was all about dedicated affordable housing, right? That's all about housing that is rents or sells at an affordable price under legal restrictions. This is a broader issue here, which is facilitating the development of lower cost housing types. So this is housing that doesn't have a subsidy in it, but they're naturally more affordable. So accessory dwelling units is a great example. You know, they tend to rent or sell at, well, usually they're rented at prices below market levels, partly because they're just small and they don't command as high a rent. Duplexes, triplexes, missing middle, all of those types of housing tend to rent or sell for below market levels. Another thing that's really important that's required by state law actually is that our zoning rules permit the development of multifamily housing. That they already do, but you know, we need to obviously it's important that we comply with state law, and we want to make sure that it's possible to develop multifamily housing somewhere in Norwich. A third goal here is to try to reduce the barriers to development. So I didn't show the data here, but there's data that shows really that there's been an incredible a slowdown in the pace of construction in Norwich. And so to the extent that there are ways to reduce the barriers, the costs of developing new housing, we wanted to do that. And also there are a lot of barriers related to septic capacity. The town does not have a sewer system, as you all know, and that limits what you can do. So we're really interested in trying to think about creative solutions to that, including you know, trying to study the wastewater needs in the town and better understand whether there might be a need to try to develop some kind of common solution. So a fourth strategy is really about public understanding. And again, this meeting is part of this process. You know, we want to make it easier for developers and the public to understand our zoning rules and our affordable housing policies. So we'll be having future meetings. We'd welcome your participation where we talk about accessory dwelling units and sort of various policies as they are emerging. We want to develop some educational materials about frequently asked questions. We want to, this is an important issue, you know, to really increase public understanding of how new development will affect town and school property taxes. There's often a lot of concern, you know, with new development. Is it going to increase our property taxes? But, you know, we can talk more about it another time, but actually the Vermont tax law is such that the more kids you have in your school, if you otherwise keep your fixed costs fixed, you know, you're not building new buildings in the school, you actually end up reducing your school taxes. So, you know, it's very unlikely that a new development would increase your net tax burden, and it could even reduce it. So that's something that we just need to, I think, talk more about and walk through some examples. We want to look at how to improve our understanding of the housing stock, and we want to undertake some research to better understand the needs. So this is my last slide before I turn it over to Brian. Just quickly, things that we've done so far. So we have this, I mentioned we have this $45,000 revolving fund. We have adopted some policies that allow for the select board ultimately with advice from the Affordable Housing Subcommittee and Planning Commission to decide you know, how that money should be spent. We consider it a revolving fund. The goal here is not so small that if we give it out in grants, it won't be there to help the next person. So you know, it's look at it as a way to kind of seed projects. We have reviewed the publicly owned land, and Brian will be talking about that. We are now starting to explore some of the feasibility of developing some of the sites that we identified in that search. And then there are a few things that the Planning Commission has undertaken. So they are nearing completion of a study of the historic development patterns in the town. They are just at the beginning of what will probably be a fairly long-term process of updating the zoning code, which would be a time to consider some of the zoning proposals. And also they will be undertaking a study of the needs and the options for handling the wastewater needs of the town. So just a sense of kind of where we are. I'm going to turn it over to Brian now, who's going to talk about the strategy of investigating the use of land owned by the town of Norwich.
Thanks, Jeff. Before I start talking, can I ask you a question?
Please.
So you didn't talk about this, but in your professional capacity, you know a bit about municipal housing strategies. Why was it so important for Norwich to have one? We hadn't had one before. And how does it relate to our group, to the Affordable Housing Subcommittee?
Yeah, sure. So I am in my day job, I work on affordable housing research and policy for a mission-driven research and consulting firm. One of the things that we have seen really around the country is that housing is a really complex topic, and there are a lot of different kinds of policies that you really need to adopt to move things forward. And so we have been encouraging cities around the country and working with cities around the country to develop a comprehensive approach where they bring their planning commission and their zoning commission and their tax policy and their housing subsidy agencies, all the different stakeholders together with the public and nonprofits, and really try to map out a comprehensive approach dealing with all of the different types of issues. And they develop plans that are much more complex than this, but the same principle that applies to these larger towns applies in a much smaller way to Norwich, in the sense that there's still a lot of different things that need to happen. And it's really important to have a roadmap, because otherwise, if you're a committee like ours, how do you know what to do, right? You're constantly trying to go back and figure out what's the next step. So now that we have a strategy, we have a menu, we're looking for some input about what are some of the key things, but this provides us with a roadmap of how we can help expand the diversity and affordability and environmental sustainability of the stock.
Thanks, Jeff. So some of the work of the subcommittee is thinking about how we fit in as a subcommittee and as individual residents, how we fit into the work plan laid out by the housing strategy. But another part is thinking about how the town, acting as the town, is essential in achieving the goals outlined by the strategy. So Jeff, you kind of skipped over it. I want you to go back to the slide with the graph of the home values in town, because this is really what we're confronting with this first work stream in the strategy that I'm going to talk about. It's no secret to anybody on this call what direction real estate prices have gone in recent years, and especially over the last couple during the pandemic. The cost of built property and the cost of vacant land is kind of astronomical. And so that explains a lot of what's here on the left side, which is the glacial pace of building. And really the only building that is happening is for development that can recoup those acquisition costs, which is very, very, very expensive homes on large properties predominantly. So if we go back to what the town can do, was really our first cut. The first work stream we took on, Jeff, if you want to go forward, is thinking about, does the town have a way to lower that barrier? Does the town have a way to make other kinds of housing development more feasible? And so one thing the strategy lays out is, could there be a process whereby the town donates or conveys some of its land for dedicated affordable housing? And so that's an investigation that we took on beginning in the fall of 2020. I can't believe it was that long ago. But the idea is that if we can lower that acquisition price, then builders or developers may see, like I said, other projects as more feasible and can pass along those savings to the eventual tenants or homeowners in an affordable housing development. And so this could be the kind of missing middle duplex housing, duplex, triplex housing that Jeff describes, or single family homes, or really the whole range of the outcomes that Jeff has told you about could be a fit depending on, can we find the right place? Can we find the right piece of town-owned land to make available? Now, the mechanism for doing that is something that hasn't been determined. That is far off in terms of what that would really look like for the town to participate in that way. Presumably it would involve some kind of process with a pool of builders or developers who would potentially partner with the town, and the town would have a process for doing the conveyance. That hasn't been sketched out. We're really at the stage of saying, well, we all kind of assume the town owns a lot of land. Could any of it even, would it make sense to even start talking about this? Is there any piece of town-owned land that would make it worth our while to explore this issue further? So if we go to the next slide, you'll see how we started. And we started with a list and a map. Here is the colored parcels on this map are town-owned land. It doesn't include land owned by the fire district, the separate municipality, the fire district, although we looked at those as well. And you'll see it's, a big mix of types. You have everything from Huntley Meadow, the Barrett Playground nearby on Beaver Meadow. You have a bunch of cemeteries. You have very, very forested areas, pretty far outside of town. It's a pretty big range. And so what we did is we started going through with at least a mental framework of what we're looking for, guided by the folks on the subcommittee with, long, knowledge and expertise of certain parts of town, as well as technical knowledge, as well, of course, as, with Rod, who was then just the town planner. And so things we were looking for, in this first cut were, is it basically a cliff? We probably can't put any housing on a cliff, or if it's in a swamp, also probably not good. There were some parcels that we found, that were under some kind of environmental conservation protection or had some other deed restriction, that even if the parcel would make sense for other reasons, just the complexity of untangling that, it presented barriers that we weren't really looking for in terms of quick wins for the town to consider. Another thing that we thought seriously about was how integrated the housing would be to the town. We didn't, the idea of just sticking affordable housing in the least desirable or most far off reaches of town wasn't attractive. And so, at least at first, we tried to consider parcels that were closer to town because they would be integrated into the fabric of the community, and also, give residents access to jobs, transit, groceries, amenities, things like that. There's I guess, like countervailing factors in all of these, of course. Physical obstacles could be overcome potentially just with higher building costs, as Jeff loves pointing out, and we'll talk about a bit later with a specific site. The proximity to town is a nice to have, but if there's only one parcel that works, putting people in Norwich may be a lot closer to their jobs, actually, even if they have to drive a bit, than having them live much further away, many towns over, and commute to a job center that's actually much closer to Norwich. So there's trade-offs with each of these criteria that we looked at initially. So where did we end up? What are the sites we identified? The ones that made the cut are here, shown kind of shaded in red. The first one is the one that's farthest to the right, the bottom right hand red circle. And that's the parcel that includes where the transfer station is now off New Boston Road, and basically proceeds north and up the hill of the site of the transfer station. The town owns quite a bit of land there. That met some of our early tests in terms of being close to town. We knew a bit about its history, and so we wanted to see if we could explore that site basically based on our first cut, our first review. The other parcels are quite large. The red circles and ovals don't really even cover it. Essentially, the town owns a giant stretch northeast of Beaver Meadow Road as you go out towards Tucker Hill Road, and then up northwest of Tucker Hill Road. Sorry, not the town, the fire district, my mistake. And that land is kind of a mix of slopes and stream and swamp and forest, and really who knows what else. And it's the development rights are controlled by the town ultimately, but right now it seems that the best knowledge of those parcels lies with the fire district. So with such a large expanse of territory in those two parcels, our assumption is, based on our present knowledge, that surely there must be something, some small piece to carve out for housing purposes that would still, achieve the objectives that the fire district needs with that land. And so that's really where we are. Those two blocks saying these met our first tests. We would like to learn more. So let's look at them individually. The first is the New Boston Road one, the one that proceeds north from the transfer station. You see it's close into town, of course, and the park and ride at Huntley Meadow. From what we know, we think it has good soils for wastewater purposes. Depending on the building site, it could be close to an existing road. It's something that we want to explore further. We have some knowledge about a former site of a town dump that was like at the extreme, from what we know, the extreme southern end of the parcel, where below where the transfer station is even now. So we need to explore some issues around that. But this is kind of one of the best options that we found out of this first cut. And I want to stress that at the end of the day, none of these sites might work. None of them might pass all the tests of our initial criteria and a deep technical review and financial feasibility and even getting builders interested. We're not that far down this road yet. Right now, we're saying there are very few tools for the town as the town identified in the strategy. This is one, and one worth getting going on. And so that's what we've done. The next site, the next slide shows the Beaver Meadow parcels that I described. Like I said, because it's such substantial territory, we're hoping that there may be some developable area. And so our first recommendation, while we answer some questions internally, I'll get to this in a bit, about the transfer station site, is to pursue some technical analysis on these quite large parcels. We understand it can be done rather inexpensively. And so actually just this week, we hope to speak with the select board about how they can move this forward and kind of make real a lot of what is on paper in terms of the town's expectations and support for using the power of the town, limited as it is, to advance shared affordable housing goals. So we can go to the next one, and it just talks about a couple open questions we have. Like I said, there was the former town dump years and years, or decades and decades ago, and at the opposite end of the parcel on Beaver Meadow Road, and then on New Boston Road, and then the Beaver Meadow one. One issue I didn't mention is, as many of you likely know, there's ongoing conversations between the town and the fire district, and so we want to make sure we're not stepping on anyone's toes and understand all the mechanisms that would be required for the fire district and the town to partner on something like this. So we're going to have this conversation with the select board this week. And like I said, hopefully we can move forward and just learn as much as we can so we know what options are really on the table for the town. So Jeff, do you want to do this? Do you want to talk about what's next for our group?
Yeah, sure. I try to do it really quickly so we can open things up for conversation. But you know, the New Boston Road, there are a lot of things that need to happen. There needs to be a conversation between the town and the fire district just to really understand better each other and talk about whether this is a good idea. And we need to be able to identify some specific sites for development. So that's something that we've proposed doing. We do plan to continue our education efforts. We'll be talking, you'll see, we're having hopefully a session soon about accessory dwelling units, which we know is a very hot topic that people want to talk about. Definitely interested in hearing from landowners who want to talk about shared goals, the possibility of land donations or how housing and conservation can be accomplished together. We definitely need to talk with other town committees. So if you're on another town committee, you want to talk about how we can work together to avoid unintended consequences, let us know. And then the school district also is very important in this puzzle. And there are some new proposed state property tax education policies that may or may not become law this week, but will have profound effects on how our property taxes are computed and may, provide further, may increase the need to find ways to lower our per pupil spending, which can be accomplished in part by increasing our student base. So with that, I want to just stop sharing and turn things back to Kathleen. Thank you, Brian, and look forward to hearing from folks in the audience.
Well, since most people are not visible tonight, it would be great if you, and if you don't choose to be visible, you can use the raise hand facility down at the bottom, and we can just begin. So very eager to hear your questions. And of course, if I can see you, we actually are all on one screen and I can see you if you raise an actual hand. So you can do it that way as well.
Kathleen, can I just ask in particular, in addition to any questions, clarifying questions, one thing we really need your thoughts in are what should we do next? What should we do next? We've been thinking about trying to find some land. We need to investigate the technical feasibility of that. What else, what's the next priority? There's a lot of things on our strategy. There may be things not on our strategy. What do you think we should prioritize next?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's a complicated topic and it's okay to ask anything. We've been working on this for years and if some of it, okay. So I see Rebecca's got a hand. Okay.
I figure someone has to go first. So here I am. First of all, I want to really thank you. I'm so grateful to you for working on this for so many years and working so hard. And special gratitude to Brian Loeb, who worked on the Child Care Committee with us. I wanted to also thank you for focusing on the impact of tax changes on the education side on property taxes if we don't address the issue of affordable housing in Norwich. I think that's an incredibly important issue. And I'm really glad to see this committee thinking in that way. We need to look holistically at the town of Norwich and the policy implications in different sectors for housing, but also for education as well. I had two quick questions. One was, have you had an opportunity or time to look at properties that might be available on the Route 5 corridor or within walking distance of town other than the site that you just discussed? And the last one is very, very small. Is the revolving fund 501c3?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last part of that question. Would you say it again?
Is the revolving fund set up for housing set up as a 501c3? What's the structure of it?
Yes. Okay.
The short answer is the town fund is not set up as a 501c3. We had talked about trying to transfer that money to the Vermont Community Foundation. And we understood from the town that there were legal issues involved with the town giving up its money to the foundation, so we weren't able to do that. But I believe that the town is, or maybe Robert can talk about this. There was some talk about developing a donation policy about whether the town would accept donations, and I don't know if that's been resolved, but that would be one way to give money away on a tax exempt basis, would be to give it to the town. But again, we need to make sure the town's willing to accept it. In terms of land, I mean, the we focused in this inquiry on land that was controlled by the town, or which the town had development rights over. So the fire district land is owned by the fire district, but the town has development rights. There were no parcels on Route 5. There is a large public parcel on Route 5 that is owned by the school district. And there has been in the past some discussions about the possibility of using, putting some housing there. So that's certainly another thing, but that was not part of our inquiry. Brian?
Yeah, there was a parcel we looked at on Route 5 North that's a water source, remember? But it was deemed too essential to even think about.
Yes. Yes, far north, there's a town well, and it just was not, fire district was quite clear that we could not develop on that property, that it would harm the core interests of the town. So we said no. There was a preserved property also on the intersection of kind of, yeah, I forget the names of the exact road.
River Road and Route 5 North, yeah.
Yeah, and it is conserved, and we're not able to develop on it. So there are a lot of properties that you could develop on, but they've been conserved, and therefore, there's a lot of limitations on what can be developed.
Thanks, Linda Gray.
Hey, thank you. And I just want to say, I think you guys have done great work, and your presentation makes a lot of sense to me. And I feel like the points that you make about the need for housing are perfectly obvious to me. And so I hope you can move forward successfully. And I just wanted to mention this idea that I have seen other towns use for a variety of different purposes. And it seems like it's like to have voters approve a 1 cent addition to the property tax for a particular purpose. So I've heard of that, like South Burlington did that in order to complete some bike paths, and raise the money and be able to borrow against it as well. Anyway, so if you all haven't thought of that, and if increasing the amount of money in that fund would be important to future steps, I just recommend that idea for consideration.
Thank you.
Thanks for raising that.
Good. Other questions or points or views?
I guess, sorry.
Elliot.
Yeah, Elliot, I'm on 27 Hillside Road. I think one question I have is I'm curious, like, I'm actually, Rebecca brought up the Education Committee in the report, and there's some great work there, but it also pointed out, all the headwinds and systemic issues, local, state, national, and housing availability faces similar constraints. I'm curious, we build 5 units, that's great, but is there like a process or something more sustainable long-term you think we can look at doing locally that would help the issue?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have some thoughts, but Brian and others may have some thoughts. Jackie, Paul. I mean, I think there's sort of, when I think about the housing situation here, I think about both Norwich and I think about the region, right? And so it's very clear at the regional level that we need to increase the overall supply of housing. And that's going to require a large number of units to be built, right? Because basically the law of supply demand still works. And so if you have a lot of people who demand housing and there's a limited supply, the price is going to go up. And so at the regional scale, there needs to be an increase in the supply. The question is how well Norwich is positioned to really contribute to that increase. Right now, we don't have a wastewater system. So the short answer is there's really no capacity to contribute to the overall scale at a meaningful level. And even if we put a wastewater system in on Route 5 and the village, it's not how many units are you going to put in that tiny little area? Probably not very many, right? Even if you wanted to, it's not going to change the dynamic. So I guess my perspective is we need a regional supply solution. And then we need to think about what do we need here in Norwich? And I think here in Norwich, we need some efforts to find ways that people of lower incomes can afford. And 5 units is meaningful at the scale, 10 units, 15 units. It's not, it would be nice to have more, but I mean, anything that we can do, I feel like we just, particularly I would say this is really important. I mean, in my day job, I work on some housing programs that are designed to help low-income families access areas a lot like Norwich that have great schools, that are just launching pads for children to do well in the future. And there's a lot of policy that's really oriented around helping people of different incomes access those neighborhoods. And I feel like, we have a responsibility personally, to try to, open up the town so it's not closed and other people can afford. So I guess I would argue that even small, relatively symbolic numbers are important here in town for increasing the diversity of our stock, even if they're not contributing to the overall supply. But we could have a whole nother topic about increasing supply, and I'm working on some things nationally that might be helpful, but probably not here in Norwich.
Thanks very much. Susan, you have something to tell us, okay?
You're on mute, Susan.
I think you're muted still, Susan.
I am muted. You'd think I'd know that by now. So you were going you were going in the direction of exactly what I was thinking. And maybe there are other people on this line, or maybe this could be a future educational event for your committee, but I know that there are some changes to the education funding and the pupil weighting. And I think that is going to be a huge impact on the town. And I did hear in the presentation, folks were concerned about taxes. I think the work that you all could do on the affordable housing area could perhaps blunt some of those issues. I know this is long-term, but I don't think it's going to change in the other direction anytime soon. So I don't know if that's more of a comment or a question or a thought of how other parts of the system could educate this group, especially around the education funding. And I was wondering why we don't have a wastewater system, but a little bird told me that there might have been some previous decisions way back that impacted that. I don't know if that's Planning Commission or another committee, but I'll do my homework. And thank you again for the work you've done. The presentation was excellent.
Thanks very much. That's great. Okay, Brian, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, just thanks for a comment, Susan. As Jeff mentioned at the beginning, the Planning Commission, in fulfillment of one of the recommendations of the current town plan, is just at the early stage of commissioning a study that would revisit, like you said, quite an old study of wastewater needs in town. If you want to get more involved, if you want to learn more about that, we just so happen to have a Planning Commission meeting this week, and the chair is on the line with us. So yeah, we're happy to help you with that if you want.
Thanks. Oh, yeah, Jackie.
Thanks, Kathleen. I just want to mention, first, thanks to this committee for their excellent work. I praise them often, but can't praise them too much. They really do a great job. It always confounds me that I think it's the last affordable housing built in Norwich was 1992. It's 30, we're coming on 30 years, and some folks here have been working on this for many of those years. So I can't underscore the urgency of this, fledgling project to get vetted and see if it is feasible. I think it's so important for us to get started and do something. And I think that we might discover through that process that we can do a little bit more. But I also can't underscore the importance of free land, because that is such a big part of the cost of the housing. And in order for us to get out of the blocks here and get anybody interested in building some housing for the population we're targeting here, we need the land to do it on. So it's a really key focus area. And thank you for doing this. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Other questions? Hi, Cheryl, would you like to speak?
Hi. Yes, I think I heard something about this on NPR, or maybe it'd be VPR more appropriately, but I'm not sure I understood it correctly. Do you know if the state is considering financial incentives for something like the accessory dwelling units?
Yeah, they are. You go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, we've heard a bit about that, Cheryl, and Jeff mentioned that we may have later in the summer an informational session on that specific topic with Vermont specific advice and knowledge, hopefully up to the minute, including anything that passes regarding subsidies for individual households. So we're learning along with you.
Cheryl, the quick, maybe somebody has up to date. I mean, literally the legislature is working on this right now. But there was a bill that includes $20 million for affordable housing, which I believe could include up to $5 million for accessory dwelling units, of which $4 million would be provided in the form of grants, and $1 million would be for kind of people to help people navigate the system and kind of walk you through the process. So I don't know if anyone has, as of yesterday, it hadn't passed, but so I don't know what the exact thing, but there's literally as we speak, and it will be resolved in the next few days. So we'll know, but that could be very interesting and exciting, but
yeah,
a town like Norwich, accessory dwelling units could be a really interesting solution for a lot of people, both as a way to generate more lower cost units, but also as an income source for people who need it, or want it, So thanks for raising that. It'll be really interesting to see. And there's a lot of really interesting things happening now in the legislature, because this problem is not just here, it's obviously statewide.
I would add one more thing, Cheryl, that makes that kind of subsidy program potentially attractive, is that you would know when it's being used, and potentially there could be affordability protections put in place for the beneficiaries, the tenants in the units that were converted. Part of the housing strategy that Jeff described has outcome goals for accessory dwelling units in town. It's possible that has been achieved. We don't know, because at the state level, there's no rental registry. It's been vetoed. At the town level, there's no rental registry. But just ADUs per se is less of an interest than ADUs that contribute to addressing some of the affordable housing needs. And when you have a subsidy program, then you're a bit further along into guaranteeing that could be the case. So it's incredibly attractive and exciting if it happens. And we would want to help Norwich residents get to a place where they can compete for those funds if there's a process like that.
Great. Thank you.
And I think we have a commitment to follow on that very closely, and we'll find ways to report back on it. So, other questions or thoughts? It's really nice to have this many of you turning out for this event tonight. We're really glad to see all of you. Let's see. Okay.
If you have not put your name in the chat and you want to be on record, just put your name in the chat so we just know you were here. Thank you.
Well,
Does anyone on the subcommittee want to say anything? Final thoughts? Paul or Cree or Brian?
I think, Jeff, you and Brian have kind of summarized it very nicely. And again, like you said, we really appreciate the fact that so many people are participating in tonight's presentation. And we look forward to trying to kind of keep everybody informed as to what's happening in Norwich. I'm in a butter on the town transfer center, and I would love to have a development put there. So that's probably one of the more exciting things that may be potentially helpful.
well, I think I'd like to add that in other towns and other places, there have been people who were willing to donate some land because of their interest and support for affordable housing, or they were able to keep the selling price down in a way that made room for developing something at a reasonable price. If you know any stories like that, I think we all know the story of Guile Hill, but if you know any stories like that, we'd like to hear about them too. Or if you know of land or people who might consider this. Thank you.
There was a question in the chat about whether it's possible to build on conserved land by using the town's eminent domain power. If there are any municipal attorneys or land use attorneys, let me know. Barbara, are you such a person?
Yes, I am.
You want to answer that question?
Well, I know that we have conserved land and there's some that's right on the road that might be a good place for a few units of housing. And at least our conservation restriction allows eminent domain to trump the restriction. And I've looked into it a little bit, but not in depth. But if it's something the town would be interested in, I could use my land use attorney skills and look into it.
Barbara, is this land that's conserved on your property?
Yes.
So
Get in touch with Jeff, Barbara.
we would love to talk with you about it. That's really a wonderful thought. And I think there's often a reluctance to use eminent domain, over the wishes of the landowner. But if the landowner is going
is willing to have eminent domain, that sounds like a good match.
Yeah. So we just need to be creative. There's a lot of land in this town, right? If we could figure out a way to unlock it, and I think there's plenty of land to both conserve and to have some units. And we just need to think about how do we accommodate people as well as plants and animals. And then there's plenty, and we're blessed, right? With so much land in this town, there ought to be a way to do that. So Barbara, thank you for suggesting that. If you want to look a little bit more into the issues that would be involved. And I just posted in today's listserv, you can find my emails there. So.
Sure. And there's just one more thing. Some conserved land doesn't have such high value as conserved land. So that's the only type of land I think would be worth making that change.
Yep.
Where it's not providing significant benefit.
Fair point. I would also suggest, personally that, if one has a large parcel and there's some, you put a few houses along the road that are consistent with the other houses there, you still have all of the land behind it, and it's, I think a lot depends on the parcel, right? And just, there are ways to accommodate, I think, at least somewhat more property, and particularly if we know that property is going to stay affordable, that maybe provides more of an incentive because now it's also advancing a public good.
I think that Brian wants to add something.
Yeah, I would just say, Barbara, I mentioned the Planning Commission earlier. They're doing lots of great things. One of them is starting to revisit the zoning and subdivision rules. And so as you think about this issue, and if there are things in our zoning and subdivision rules that you think may be obstacles, I would suggest attending a Planning Commission meeting and making your voice heard on this kind of issue.
Thanks very much. Okay, so Anything else from our public? Thank you, public. Okay, all right.
Great.
Looks like
You
we're
want to throw it
winding
back to
up.
me or you, yeah? Okay, well, thank you, Kathleen, for moderating that, and thank you all for participating. We try to not keep you too long. We have one more order of business here, which is to approve the minutes, which we're going to do really quickly, right? But hopefully, and then we're going to adjourn the meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second,
Any discussion? Did Chris second it?
I second.
Oh, Paul seconded. Okay. All in favor, Kathleen?
Yes.
Aye.
Right.
Aye.
Paul? Aye.
Yes.
Craig, yes.
Motion to
Jeff?
adjourn.
Okay. All in favor, motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Aye.
Thanks,
Unanimous.
everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everyone.
much. Please
Thank you
stay in
very much,
touch.
everybody. Enjoy the
Bye.
spring.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you all for attending.
Yes,
Great.
yes.
Great showing.
Yeah, good meeting. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Good job, Jeff and Brian. Thank you very much.
One second, hold on.